In the age before reckoning, when the mountains still bore the fingerprints of the All-Father and the stars shone upon a Faerun, yet unbroken by time, there stood a realm of unparalleled majesty. Ostoria, the empire of the giants. Its cloud palaces drifted above mountain peaks, and its stone citadels carved valleys into living monuments. For millennia, the children of Anew the All-Father ruled the north with wisdom, strength, and a stoic pride unmatched among the mortal races. But peace is a fragile thing in a world where gods still stride among the clouds. The spark that lit the skies. Before the first axe met scale, before a single breath of frost or fire was loosed in rage, there was tension, heavy and coiled like a sleeping serpent. The giants of Ostoria had long ruled the northern reaches of Faerun, their empire vast, mighty, and ancient beyond the memory of even the oldest elves. They lived in harmony with the world's rhythms, building colossal cities among the peaks and clouds, commanding the elements with divine authority passed down from Anew the All-Father himself. But below, the dragons stirred, proud, cunning, and envious. The dragons, especially those of the chromatic flights, watched Ostoria with growing malice. They saw the giants' soaring cloud castles and storm-wrought thrones not as divine birthrights, but as provocations. To their ever-hungry hearts, the giants lived too well, held too much, and cast too wide a shadow over the world. And then came the god who fed that fire. Garrix, the Lord of Flame, a draconic deity whose very essence was destruction, peered into the hearts of his children and kindled their greed into unquenchable rage. Whether the first spark was born of Garrix's madness or a calculated act of war remains uncertain. But what is known and sung of in the ashes of history is that he sent an avatar of himself to the mortal realm. This aspect of godly fire gathered a flight of red dragons, great beasts with wings like furnaces and blood that boiled, and descended upon the sky-swept city of Uvalund, a jewel among the cloud giant dominions. What followed was annihilation. Flame rained from the heavens as the dragons shrieked across the sky. The city's stormcallers summoned thunderclouds, but even the might of the winds was drowned beneath the inferno. Towers of pearl and starlight melted, the skies turned crimson. Giants, immense noble beings, leapt into the air to face the attackers and fell, burning from the clouds. Uvalund was erased. The dragons left nothing behind but smoke and falling cinders. To dragonkind, it was a triumph, proof of their power. But to the giants, it was sacrilege, an unprovoked act of war that could not be ignored. The murder of Uvalund was not just an assault, it was a message. The age of dragons had come. So Ostoria answered. The cloud giants wailed storms of vengeance. The fire giants forged weapons of war beneath the earth. The frost giants, who made sport of killing white dragons, painted their axes with new runes of hate. The storm giants, eldest of Anew's brood, turned their gazes from prophecy to retribution. Thus, the Wyrm War began. At first, it was a northern conflict. Flights of dragons clashed with storm-wreathed citadels in the skies. Frost giant warbands hunted draconic lairs across the tundra and broke their bones on glaciers. But the fire of war spreads quickly. As the years turned to decades, then centuries, the war engulfed all of Faerun. Every kind of dragon, both chromatic and metallic, joined the conflict. And all the giant races, hill, stone, cloud, storm, fire, and frost, rose as one, answering the call of blood and honor. What had begun as a single act of fire became 1,000 years of ruin, and Faerun trembled beneath the feet of titans and dragons alike. The great battles of the 1,000-year war. As the Wyrm War spread across the breadth of Faerun, the skies themselves grew dim with the shadow of wings. Mountains echoed with the roars of dragons and the war cries of giants. Forests were reduced to ash, and seas boiled where ancient worms and titanic warriors clashed. Each battle seemed to rend the world anew, and though no mortal now lives who saw them, their echoes persist in song, in saga, and in the scars left upon the land. It was during these centuries of thunder and flame that the giants unleashed one of their greatest creations, Vonindod, the doom of worms. Forged in the molten depths of Ostorian fire, giant forges, crafted with the aid of rune masters and cloud giant seers, Vonindod was a colossus, a godlike weapon wrought of rune-etched adamant and powered by stormfire. Stories claim it stood near 1,000 feet tall, with burning eyes like twin suns and a voice like an avalanche. Its limbs were powered by ancient elemental cores, and each movement shook the earth like the footfalls of the Allfather himself. Claws and breath were useless against it. Entire flights of dragons were swept from the sky by its rune-carved arms. Where Vonindod walked, cities were defended, and hope returned to the embattled giant clans. But the war was not won by constructs alone. It was also written in the blood of heroes. Foremost among them stood a name that even dragons fear to whisper, a frost giant of immense size. Even for his kin, Wyrm was said to have been born during the coldest night in 1,000 years, his first cry shattering the ice of the glacier lake where his mother gave birth. From youth, he was a prodigy, cold-hearted in battle, but fiercely loyal to his people. His weapon, the great axe Frostcleave, was forged from star ice and rhymed with the breath of a slain white dragon matron. Where Wyrm strode, worms perished. At the Battle of the Shattered Crags, he met a full-grown blue dragon that had turned the highlands into glass with its lightning breath. The beast's hide was thicker than stone, its eyes alight with arrogance. Wyrm, bleeding from earlier wounds and alone after his warband fell, climbed the cliffs and faced the dragon atop the storm-racked peaks. With a single swing of Frostcleave, empowered, some say, by the wrath of the storm gods, he split the dragon's skull in twain. Lightning crackled from its corpse for days after. At Blackstone Fen, Wyrm encountered Skorlath the Vile, a black dragon whose acidic breath had eaten away 3 cloud giant towers and turned the local rivers to poison. Alone, Wyrm charged across the fen, the marsh bubbling beneath his frostbound feet. The dragon dove, claws outstretched. Wyrm caught the worm mid-flight, twisted its spine with his bare hands, and slammed its broken body into the earth with such force that it left a crater that still festers to this day. Yet even giants meet their end. His final battle came at the siege of Skyhold, the last great citadel of the storm giants. There, the worm host was led not by a chromatic horror, but by Thasmirix, an ancient gold dragon, cunning and ruthless, who had leveled giant cities from the coast of the Moonshae Isles to the frozen peaks of the spine of the world. Some say Thasmirix was a king among dragons, or a prophet of Bahamut, who had turned from the path of mercy. He was a general who spoke in riddles and commanded armies with divine precision. Wyrm faced him atop the spires of Skyhold. They fought for 3 days and 3 nights, frost and flame dueling beneath storm-choked skies. Thunder cracked. The citadel groaned beneath their might. At dawn on the 4th day, the towers fell. The storm giants mourned. The dragons withdrew. Both Wyrm and Thasmirix were gone. Neither body ever found. It is said that the winds howl Wyrm's name in the heights of the mountains, and that somewhere, deep beneath the earth, Thasmirix still dreams. Despite the valor of Wyrm and the might of Vonindod, the tide slowly turned. The dragons, relentless and numerous, launched coordinated assaults upon Ostoria's southern provinces. The red dragons incinerated farmlands and forests. The green worms whispered poison into the hearts of weaker giant lords, turning them to betrayal. The blue dragons summoned storms that scoured the deserts and shattered stone walls. Hill giants fled. Stone giants vanished into the deep earth. Even the mighty cloud cities once untouchable, were dragged from the skies. And so, Vonindod was recalled. It marched to the north, its tread cracking glaciers, to stand guard over what little remained. There, in the frozen bastions of Ostoria's last cities, the giants made their final stand. The golden age of giant kind had come to its twilight, but though battered, they were not broken. Though diminished, they still stood. The fire of vengeance still smouldered in their hearts. The end of the 1,000-year war. For over a millennium, the world burned beneath the endless fury of the Wyrm War. What began as a single strike, flame upon cloud, had stretched across an age, shaping the very bones of Faerun. Mountains were ground to rubble. Forests that had stood since the dawn of the world were reduced to charcoal. Whole bloodlines of both giant and dragon were extinguished, remembered only in rune and ash. And in the end, even gods turned their eyes away. It was not a glorious end. There was no final clash to crown a victor, no last stand sung across the ages. Instead, the war simply broke, fractured beneath its own weight. The thunder began to fade. To the small folk who watched from the shadows of Titans, it seemed as if the dragons had simply vanished. One day, the skies were filled with shrieking wings. The next, they were quiet. The great worms no longer came in force, no longer summoned flame to scour the hills. The mighty flights that had once brought ruin to Ostorian strongholds withdrew into the high peaks, the deepest jungles, the forgotten realms beneath the earth. The dwarves, ever chroniclers of ruin, offer a different tale, one whispered in the halls of stone. According to them, the war had not truly ended. It had turned inward. The dragons, they say, had begun to war among themselves. The seeds of division, long present but buried beneath their hatred of the giants, had finally bloomed. The chromatic dragons, children of Tiamat, who revelled in chaos, greed, and dominion, turned upon their metallic kin. Those who followed the path of Bahamut, guardians of justice and balance. The civil war that erupted among dragonkind shook akin to a cataclysm. Lairs were destroyed, broods were sundered, ancient alliances were shattered like eggshells. Some sages claim that it was during this conflict that Tiamat herself was banished from the prime material plane, cast into the hellish depths of Avernus by gods who feared her growing influence. Others say the metallic struck a dark bargain with celestial powers to sunder her from her followers. Whatever the truth, the outcome was clear. The dragons had no strength left to give. Their attention turned from the giants to themselves, and with the collapse of their unity came the silence of war. In the frozen courts of the north, the giants watched the skies grow still. Their cities, those that remained, stood half buried in snow. Vonindod, cracked and dormant, lay beneath the ice, its great heart extinguished. The lords of Ostoria, weary and bloodied, sent forth envoys not to sue for peace, but to confirm the absence of enemies. The truce was never signed with ink or rune or flame. It was an unspoken thing, a mutual retreat, an exhausted exhale of two broken peoples. When the last battle ended, when the final horn ceased its mournful cry, Ostoria stood no longer as an empire, but as a scattered remnant. From its former glory, continents spanning cloud cities and unbreakable fortresses, only the frozen north remained. The great glacier, the cold lands, and the savage north cradled the last sons and daughters of Anum's legacy. Ruins littered the south, buried beneath jungle and desert, lost to time and overgrowth. The dragons, too, retreated, hoarding their memories as jealously as their treasure. The oldest among them slumbered in deep lairs, haunted by dreams of ancient battles and long-dead foes. And the younger dragons grew up with only whispered legends of the time when their kind dared to challenge the giants of old. But the fire never truly died. There are those, storm prophets, mad wormlings, and seers deep within the mountains, who believe the truce was a pause, a lull in the storm, that the war sleeps but dreams of fire, and they warn. Should Tiamat return, should her great heads rise once more into the mortal realm, then the compact will shatter. The rage of the chromatic host will be rekindled, and the giants, bound by honor and blood, will rise again. Stirring of gods. When the last horns of war fell silent, and the frost of centuries crept over the bones of fallen heroes, Ostoria, once the crown of the world, was no more. In its collapse, 1,000 wonders were lost. The art of shaping cloudstone and anchoring floating cities to the heavens vanished like breath in winter. Rune magic that once chained the very elements to the will of storm kings faded from memory. The bloodlines of the Orning thinned, and the unity of the giant races dissolved into isolation and stagnation. But worst of all was the silence of their father. Anew the All-Father, progenitor of giant kind and architect of Ostoria's glory, turned his back on his children. With fury unspoken and sorrow unmeasured, Anew withdrew his gaze. No longer would he bless them. No longer would he hear their prayers. Until the giants could reclaim their legacy and restore Ostoria's grandeur, they were, in his divine eyes, no more than echoes of what they had once been. This divine abandonment carved deep wounds into the soul of giant kind. For centuries they wandered in spiritual exile, scattered tribes, forgotten kings, and fragmented memories. They became shadows of their ancient power, nursing pride too wounded to heal, yet too stubborn to forget. But history has a way of stirring when least expected. In recent years, the balance of power in Faerun shifted once more. The small folk, once insignificant in the eyes of giants and dragons alike, accomplished the unthinkable. They halted the return of Tiamat, not through ancient bloodlines or divine edict, but through sheer mortal will. Their triumph echoed across the plains. To Anew, it was a rebuke, a shameful reminder of his children's complacency, their slumber, their failure to rise when the world most needed strength. And so, the All-Father acted. Anew stirred the Ordning, the ancient caste order of giant society, until it cracked and splintered. The 6 principal kinds, storm, cloud, fire, frost, stone, and hill, were set into competition, each vying for his lost favor. While he maintained a measure of unity within each type, he pitted them against one another, testing their ambition, their cunning, their strength. Once again, the world trembles beneath the feet of giants. Across the north, hill giants ravage farmland in grotesque displays of dominance. Frost giants scour the coastlines, seeking relics of the Wyrm War, while stone giants awaken from centuries of dreaming, driven to reshape mountains in their image. Fire giants, ever proud, unearth old forges and rebuild ancient engines of war. And in the high skies, cloud giants seek fragments of the old ways, chasing remnants of lost cities once tethered to the firmament. These actions are not coordinated. They are contests, trials by fire, chaos, and ambition. Each clan, each lord, each warrior believes their rise might earn the All-Father's gaze once more. But their thunder has not gone unnoticed. The dragons, always watchful, have felt the shift. They see the rise of the giants not as redemption, but as a threat. The echoes of Ostoria's power stirring again have ignited a quiet fury in the ancient worms. To them, the war never truly ended. It simply slept. Now, as titans awaken and colossi stir beneath the ice, the dragons stretch their wings once more. Flights of worms gather in shadow. Ancient grudges flare in the hearts of gold and red alike. The giants rise to reclaim a lost crown. The dragons rise to ensure it remains buried, and the world holds its breath, for the Wyrm War may soon burn anew.